Hello, mathematicians. This is Mr. Mailhot. Let's do some math. This is in your packets, page 1, and actually, I'm gonna make a second video going over a few problems from pages 2 and 3. Even though it doesn't say in the packet, I looked at the problems and I thought it'd be helpful. One last thing before we get started. Remember, with this, you can always pause the video at any time to write down what you gotta write down. In fact, you should do that. Don't rush and just copy without really listening, because you do need to understand. Also, if you want to go back a few seconds or a few minutes or even the whole thing and watch it again after you write everything down, that's a great student strategy to use also. Let's get started. And actually, before we even get started, I want to remind us of what we just did on Friday, this brain teaser. You don't have to get the paper out, and I'm not going to redo it all here, but there was one main idea. Remember when we did all the brain teaser, and when we looked here, we saw sometimes the sign flipped. We have a poster up in the front of the room that says why, but I just wanted to remind us. Remember, you flip, and I'm going to write it like you flip around, you flip the inequality sign if you divide or multiply by a negative number. And it's not just some magical rule that we made up. It actually worked with these numbers. Remember, like sometimes we had to flip the sign around here because of what happened here. Sometimes they stayed the same, sometimes they flipped. They flipped when you divide or multiply by a negative number. That's going to come into play with this first problem. With that this first page. With that said, let's go to page 1. Colder and colder. I'm going to use our story problem, word problem strategy, that race strategy. R stands for read. Let's read it. It's currently 0 degrees outside and the temperature is dropping 4 degrees every hour. The temperature after h hours is negative 4h. Let's annotate. It's currently 0 degrees outside, underline that, and the temperature is dropping 4 degrees every hour, underline that. The temperature after h hours is negative 4h. I think we could also annotate this dropping. That means like going down or subtracting or minusing. Okay? Now number 1 says explain, and we don't need to cross out, and there's not much left to cross out. And actually, problem number 1, the E in race stands for equation. Look, they already gave us an equation. So let's use it. Excuse me. It says explain what the equation negative 4h equals negative 14 represents. Well, to help understand what that represents, let's make a table, everyone. Draw a table, a T-chart, where the left column represents hours. That'll be like the H. And we'll have this one represent the temperature. Now, when it says currently 0 degrees outside and it's dropping every 4 degrees every hour, well, if it's currently 0 degrees outside, that's like the start. Current means the start. So no hours have passed. 0, 0. That's the start. But after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, it's going to get colder by 4 each hour that goes by. It doesn't tell us if it ever stops, so it might just keep getting colder and colder. What helps us understand this expression here, negative 4h, actually the table helps us understand it, I think. If you take any number in the hours column and multiply it by negative 4 times by negative 4, don't you get the number that's in the right-hand column for every single one? I mean, even 5 times negative 4 gives you negative 20. And what's cool about that is instead of counting up by ones like we did here, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we don't have to do that. We could jump all the way, to 10. And if we know that just times negative 4 is the pattern or is the expression, then that gives us a temperature of negative 40 degrees. We could jump right to that without having to list them all out. Okay? With that said, let's do number 1 now. explain what the equation negative 4h equals negative 14 means. Well, that means it represents the number of hours it took to get to negative 14 degrees. The number of hours it took to get or to equal negative 14 degrees. That's what it means. How many hours it took to get to negative 14 as it's going down by 4 each hour. Now for number 2, well, what value of h makes this equation true? When was it negative 14 degrees? I mean, let's look at our table first. I don't see a negative 14 here, but I think, you guys are smart. You're observant. Wouldn't it be right here? Right between negative 12 and negative 16? If that's true, then that means the hours that match up with it would have to be right between negative 3 and 4, which is negative 3.5. Now that's cool thinking. That's math thinking. You just did some math. But remember, I'm focusing on using equations. That's what you guys are learning now. So let's use the equation they gave us. Copy it down. Negative 4h equals negative 14. And we're going to do the same solving steps that we've been doing in our class of dividing both sides by negative 4, canceling out the multiplier and the divider, the coefficient and the thing you're dividing by. And you get h equals some number. You see it's a negative divided by a negative, so it's going to come out positive. And if you don't believe me, grab a calculator. This isn't because I said the answer is 3.5. When you divide 14 by 4, you get 3.5. If you don't believe me, go do it on a calculator. Pause the video and go do it, all right? Once you do that, come back, and now let's do number 3. For number 3, it says explain what the inequality negative 4h is less than or equal to negative 14 represents. Well, the negative 4h and the negative 14 still mean the same thing as up in number 1. The only thing that's different is this less than or equal to sign, this inequality sign. So that's the only thing we need to change in what it represents. I'm going to almost copy the same wording from number 1. Watch this. You should write it down too. It represents the number of hours it took to get to less than or equal to negative 14 degrees. The number of hours it took to get to less than or equal to, same as the symbol there. Now what makes this true? Well, we can use the same steps, copy down the same equation, or I guess the same inequality. It's not an equation because it doesn't have an equal sign. And we can do the same thing of dividing by negative 4 on both sides and canceling out. The same thing happens, and we're gonna get h and 3.5, but the inequality sign is what is important. Because if it's getting colder than negative 14 degrees, that's all these numbers down here. I mean, aren't all these colder than negative 14, right? So look at what we did the other day. If you divide or multiply by a negative number, you flip the sign. What did we just divide by here? A negative 4. So that means we have to flip the sign around. Flip the sign around because we divided by a negative. This means any hours greater than or equal to 3.5, it'll be colder than negative 14. And look, these are all greater than negative, or these are all greater than 3.5, right? And it's colder than negative 14. Okay, that's a good application. I'm going to end there. Come back for video 2 when you're ready. We're going to go through some problems on page 2 and page 3. Remember, you learn math and get smarter by doing, not just watching. Now go do some math. Bye.